All right, welcome everyone and happy Thursday to you. I am just gonna wait a moment or two here before we kick things off, let everybody come on in. I wanna make sure that we're coming across okay, both audio, visual, and chat. So I'll throw a welcome everyone in chat. If you guys could all let me know back via chat if everything is coming through okay. So, let's see if we get a response here, and then we'll kick things on off. Try this one more time. Can you all hear? Oh, there. Okay, perfect. Thanks, Matt. All right. I always like to do the good housekeeping approval first. So, all right. So, hey, Steve, welcome everybody. Good to see you all. My name is Andrew Morgan. I'm the founder of Write a Boom. Robbie, good to see you. Welcome all. People I know are starting to come in. In interest of time, I'm going to start to kick things off here. I'm going to be looking down just in this, setting the stage at my notes, because there's some important things I want to, make note of before we get into the Q&A with our awesome guests. So again, Andrew Morgan, founder of Write a Boom. I'm joined here today by Exigence CEO and co-founder Noam Morgenstern. Noam, thanks for joining, and thanks for putting this on for everybody. This is your idea. I thought it was a really good one. So anytime we can do something to help the community, I really appreciate your insight on that. So welcome everybody. Welcome Noam, and thanks.
Thank you. Welcome everyone.
Yeah, absolutely, Noam. We'll be hearing from you throughout this. So here's what I want to kind of convey and set the stage. Since Write a Boom 2026, I've spoken literally with hundreds of MSPs about a number of topics, and one thing that is coming up over and over is this selling environment we are in feels different. I'm air quoting, right? Feels different. And by the way, in chat, if you think things quote unquote feel different in terms of how prospects and customers are transacting versus how they used to over the course maybe of the last 6 to 12 months, would you let me know what your thoughts are in chat? And I've been working and reading quite a bit over and over about, there's a book out there called The Jolt Effect, and it talks about 60% of stalled deals aren't lost to competitors, they're lost to buyer indecision, because the buyer lacked confidence in making the right choice. This is a phenomenal book, and just real quick, why you should take a look at it. Because it was written in 2020, and 2020, if you recall, was the pandemic. And what did buying do in 2020? Well, it shifted from face-to-face, hey, Nett, how are you? Let's talk, to virtual. And with that, they were able to take 2.5 million sales conversations and actually gain and glean this type of information. So I'm not going to go into depth into it, but that is one of the big things that came out of it. So to put things into perspective, your prospects aren't waking up at night worried about unpatched vulnerabilities and EDR telemetry, right? They're worried about risk to revenue, their operational downtime, reputational damage, legal exposure should things happen to something that they are maintaining, et cetera, et cetera. No, just so you know, that chat is if you go out to the YouTube, you can interact.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
So I just wanted you to know.
Thank you.
Noam's in here interacting.
I'm trying to reply. Yeah.
Yeah, you got a lot of fans out there. So if you want to go out to the YouTube side and you can say that. So, but anyway, Nett, does that make sense? In other words, our clients aren't worried about the things that we think they're worried about at all. So that's really where today's conversations start. And it's not what you're selling, but how you're selling it. And so today I'm joined with two, I think, most strategic minds in having these types of conversations. Folks that have been in this industry a long time, which is Nett Lynch, the CISO of Kraft Kennedy, and David McCall, the director of Cybersecurity at Computer Solutions. I'll introduce them momentarily. So today we're going to be unpacking a few things. We're going to be looking at how they use risk assessments or assessments in general to de-risk decisions, how they create urgency, but doing it without fear, how they lead with strategy, not the stack and your quote unquote gaps, and what really means to show up as a true CISO or vCISO. That's Nett and I have a hotly contested debate, and others do these days, about that title. We'll also dive into why incident readiness is a business conversation, not just a cybersecurity one. How tabletop exercises can become an aha moment, and why having a platform to manage your IR process is a critical thing. So with that, Nett, let me introduce you first. And if you could tell everybody a little about yourself and your background, and then I'll go over to David and then Nett.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. This is a topic that is close to my heart because I love to have conversations with MSPs and, of course, in the cybersecurity and compliance space. And I think this is an area that so many struggle with. Is they see the value of it, but they just can't get their clients to see the value, that their clients need to, buy into this stuff. So I've been in IT for almost 30 years, believe it or not. The last 18 have been in security, and the last 10 have specifically been in cybersecurity. So I know the client strategy space inside and out as a VCIO, vCISO, and now I'm a CISO at an MSP, and recently launched a division called Legion, which is focused on security advisory services in co-managed solutions.
Awesome. Thanks, Nett. Really appreciate it. And always great to have you. And all you do to help out, like you're always on calls like this or doing things. I've seen you at Empath as an example, doing courses, helping others. So a real go-giver in the community. David, welcome. And I appreciate you joining. A little about your background, yourself, and what you do there at Computer Solutions.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. David McCall at Computer Solutions. I've been in the business for in IT for over 30 years as well. Started out as a project manager for app dev and saw a lot of the security issues arise through app dev, and developed, like Nett, developed a real passion for not only what that security meant to business, but also just the different business conversations that drove internally and externally. I started at a large corporation, and that meant one thing to the internal departments, the different business departments, and I was fascinated by the conversations there, and as well as the risk it posed to the business in the different avenues. And bringing that to an MSP and having that conversation almost in reverse, and seeing it from this perspective, having that conversation back to the different business units as to what keeps you up at night. Again, it's a real passion to me. I love the conversation, just the different conversations that spark and different perspectives there. So translating it's something that has kind of come full circle for me in my business today. And again, just appreciate being here. Thanks for having me, Andrew.
Yeah, it's always, absolutely, Dave. It's always neat hearing it from the opposite side. Like at Write a Boom this year, there's a gentleman, Jason Duncan, who was a CFO for many years for a large manufacturer, and had worked obviously with many IT and security companies. And from the buyer side, he's now the CFO of an MSP, and it's really interesting how he's helping his MSP have conversations at the executive level on how he has insight. He's kind of educating them on how the psychology and the decision-making process and what that C-level person's thinking about, and, listening to his salespeople, and he's like, they don't care about what you're saying. They really don't. This is where their minds are at. And so it's just really nice when we can put ourselves on the other side and hear from folks like yourself. Noam, quick intro from you to everybody. I think everybody out there knows you based on your fan base. A lot of hey Noams out there.
So first of all, I've also been around for like 30 years. On the IT, information systems, process optimizations, more on the corporate level. I've been working with MSPs for the past few years, really fascinated and very focused on the MSP space. What we provide is a platform that empowers MSPs to provide instant response plans, run tabletops, and actual IR, but in a platform, not in a Word document. And thank you, Andrew, and two of our partners, David and Nett, for sharing your wisdom. Happy to be here.
Thanks, man. So let's dig in, Nett. And I'd like both of you, David, and your perspectives on this. 100 years of brain power. Let's start here. So why do you think so many MSPs are leading with security-focused conversations? It's around, controls gaps, and there's a lot of conversations around tooling and tactics and what's going on in terms of threat actors, when the conversation really should focus on business impact, risk to revenue, operations, et cetera. So your perspective, Nett, on all your years of working, in this business, talking to tons of MSPs.
So I've come up with two reasons that this happens. One, we're nerds. We love the features. We love the tools. We like a framework, right? Because then it's not something we dreamed up. It's not our recommendation. It's somebody else or a set of standards that is saying you need to do these things. But the clients still don't see the value in that, unless if it's a compliance that they have to comply with. But if it's just a framework, they don't see the value in it. The second part of it is most people start an MSP because they love the tech or they're good at the tech. It's not because I want to solve business problems, right? You don't think I'm going to start an MSP with that as your goal. So understanding business is a special skill that most of us aren't taught. That shift happens when you're a little more mature in the organization, once you've been in MSP for a while, and you realize that you need to have different conversations. And when that conversation shifts to talking about business instead of tools and features and gaps, then your clients tend to have that aha moment because you're speaking their language. We're speaking nerd and they're speaking business. They're not going to learn nerd. We need to learn business.
Yeah, really well said. David, your perspective on it.
No, thanks. It's really the same. It echoes a lot of what Nett was saying. It's the conversation initially comes out. That's what we know. It's what we talk. It's how we talk. We talk features and it's what we talk around the office. But when you get out in the field, and especially in the sales calls, it really does shift, and you can see that dynamic. I'll go back a little bit to when, my previous job in a large corporation. You read the room, and if you sit there and read the room and to who the C-levels and GRCs listening to, when you go around to the different business leaders, that's exactly who they're focused on. And if you can imagine bringing up tech in that setting, it will get you a bunch of zero. So it really is. That's what they're listening to. That's what drives the conversation, drives requirements, and it's the same thing here. So when you're having that conversation, as Nett mentioned, and you're leading to, Andrew, it really is about the business and what the business needs.
Yeah. It's interesting, when you zoom back a lens, right, and you think about, let's just take, God forbid you had to talk to a neurosurgeon, right? And, the breadth and depth of technical terms, they know it, science and molecular level. You imagine them explaining to you what's going on and why they're going to do the procedure, why you should consider doing this procedure this way. Like, you would look at them like completely, again, why you lack confidence is because you have no idea what they're talking about. And that's how we have to think about the similar kind of genre when we go in and start talking to them. Why so many deals? And it's not just our industry, by the way. The jolt effect that I referred to early on, where 60% of deals get stalled because of lack of confidence. It's a syndrome, horizontally in selling, right? So keep that in mind. So Nett, executives often see security and IT as an expense, until, of course, an incident happens. That is, how do you communicate, things, being incident ready, and whether it's in a setting of operational resilience, protection of revenue, or brand reputation, as an example.
So it's kind of what you just said, how if we get too far into the weeds and we're talking about features and tools and all this stuff, or we're using lots of FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, it's not resonating with them. And for most of the execs, all of what we're talking about is theory, right? They can't put themselves in that situation if they don't have a frame of reference for it. So it is unfortunate, and I think everybody on this call can attest that the time that clients are most responsive is after they have an incident, right? We don't want that to happen. So let's not wait for that. Let's start doing more tabletops. The more tabletops we can do, the more the execs are going to be able to put themselves into a situation without having to live it for real, without having all the chaos that goes with it. And then they could start to see for themselves, oh, wait, there's a gap there. Oh, wait, we're not protecting that. They start to have those aha moments of why this stuff is important and why we're making recommendations. The key is they need to see the connection between the recommendations we're giving and the business problem they're solving. So your tabletops need to be business oriented. They can't be technical in nature, because that's not your audience. Your audience are the business decision makers or the functional department heads in that organization. So your tabletops need to be at that level. And in doing that, walking them through an incident and giving them curveballs and telling them, okay, this is your situation. This is what just happened. What do you do now? They have to think through it. They're going to have to think about, what resources do I have? What are my options? In a way that they've never had to think about that before. So I think doing tabletops is hugely important. Even if, like, when I was a vCISO, I never charged extra for doing tabletops because I felt they were that important. I never wanted price to get in the way. And it doesn't take a whole lot of effort to put a tabletop together and to run one. So for me, it was always just, it comes with the service. And once they have those aha moments, they're much more receptive. And then you can start talking about risk. So you can go back to, when we were discussing, making this change, this is the reason, because when we went through this tabletop, you got to hear and you didn't have a solution for it. So let's solve that problem, right? Now you're solving a business problem. Now they're thinking through an incident and they're connecting those dots of your recommendation and solving that business problem. You also have a lot less education to do if you use that method, because if you're just trying to sell tools and solutions, there's so much education that goes into it, they get analysis paralysis. They have to learn so much in order to make a good decision that they make no decision. So I find that taking them through tabletops helps to give them more awareness of the business effects.
Tim asked a great
question. Chime in? Oh.
You want to chime in?
Sure.
Tim asked a great question, and because Nett, you kind of went into the, like, how do you get them there? How do you get execs there? And maybe let me just kind of posture this. David, love your thoughts too. But starting with you, Nett, like, we talked a lot about over the years business impact analysis, right? Which is again, isn't a thing as much as it is. I think it leads with a conversation about. Brian Blakely, I think, is one of the best in the business about this. If and we can get into how do you learn more about Brian, but he's excellent about, like, walk me through how you make money. Walk me through your critical systems that support revenue for 70, 80, 90% of the business. Now you're starting, like, so can you kind of bring us back to how you got there?
Absolutely. So many times MSPs have some person on the other side, on the client side, that's an obstacle. It's usually like an office manager, that's their point of contact, or like an office admin, something like that. They're not a decision maker. They could say no, but they can't say yes. And they're not the right people to talk to have these sorts of strategic conversations. So my tactic, which for the most part was very successful, was to ask them those questions they don't have the answers to. To do these, like, this person doesn't want to pass me on to the decision maker. Okay, then I'm going to treat you like the decision maker, and you're going to keep saying, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. And that was very effective for me to get past that wall. And I even did a tabletop with the office manager alone to prove my point that she was not the right person that I needed to talk to, but I couldn't say those words that bluntly. She needed to come up with that. It was that personality type. It needed to be her idea. So taking a person like that through a tabletop, at least starting it, and I have no idea it's not my decision. It's not my decision. It's not my decision. Okay, then I think maybe next time we could talk about having a different audience in this. And I was able to get the right people to the table. I mean, that's a little bit of an extreme example, but it's very important that you're having the right conversations with the right people. And once you have the right people in your audience, then you can start asking those questions, right? Understanding like how money moves through the organization. That's hugely impactful because it gives you a very good insight into all the different resources in the organization and what dependencies they have. It also lets you know how they make money, right? Learning what their growth strategy is, how they plan to execute that growth strategy. Is it a wish or is it a goal? Do they actually have a plan to do it? Or is it just, oh, we're going to double our sales in a year? Okay, how? And understanding it to the things that make that decision maker, what they think about every day, what keeps them up at night, what drives them every day, the things they worry about in their business and the things that motivate them. And the more that you can align yourself with those two categories and ask questions along those two paths, you're going to uncover so many black swans because you're showing an interest in the thing they're passionate about.
Yep. So David, like, let's hear from you, but like, I'll use a kind of like real world case study. Just last week, about a week and a half ago, Nucor Steel, one of the largest steel manufacturers in the country, if we walked in and started to talk to the decision makers around technical controls, et cetera, again, they're going to glass over. But if you ask them about who their largest customers are, if you ask them about what are the contractual obligations they have from both a logistics, a distribution level, et cetera, with their largest customers, and if that was impacted, talk to me about what that's like. Well, lo and behold, they could probably articulate that very well. And in fact, Nucor went down from a deep, cybersecurity incident about a week ago, where all manufacturing went offline, and they were in a bad situation. So, from kind of using that scenario, David, how about you? How do you approach, just doubling down on Tim's question? How do you get people engaged at the executive level?
Yeah, so most of the time, our customers range vary from 50 users to in the hundreds and thousands. So we face that at different levels, but in general, we offer the service. We bundle our service using Known's platform, and we offer the consulting that goes along with it. And really, the only way to get in my mind, to get a solid plan is to run them through that tabletop, because then you're putting in all the pieces, you're putting in the contacts, you're putting in the roles. You can ask them questions, who does this, but to really fill it out correctly, we basically let the customer know, thank you for making this decision. We think you made the right decision to bring this on. And obviously you're checking a box here by from a compliance standpoint by having an IR plan. But beyond that, it is, we have the first conversation with the IT team and letting them know we are going to have a full tabletop with all your business leaders. That's part of the solution. that we're selling. And to do so, and sometimes I think that comes, we get mixed response at first with that, because what we find is that the IT team may be like, thank goodness we've been trying to do this for years. So we get a lot of that. We also get, we don't want to, cover anything that we don't want to cover. we want the, behind the curtains. And we just let them know that, look, we're here to support you. We're going to put, you're the guys wearing the capes. You're the guys doing this all the time. We're going to absolutely support you and let everybody know in that meeting what you're doing, and really bring them up as being the superheroes of the business. So once we get that buy-in from the IT team, and run through a quick scenario ourselves, we actually have a tabletop with every business leader that we can get to the table. Usually that's the C-suite, and the business leaders around that, and bring them in. And I think you both hit on this up front, is once you start getting the C-levels asking that question, because we run this tabletop at a strategic, not tactical level. Once the questions regarding processes and the C-levels are asking the questions, do we have something this? What's our communication at this point? Who do we have to fill this role? Once those questions are getting asked at that level, then they're invested. But back to your question, Andrew, that's how we get them to the table. It's we sell it that it's right away. Here's what you're going to get, and usually that's well received.
Nice. No, you were going to chime in with something.
Yeah, and I'm happy David also spoke. So what we see MSPs do is, when it's done the right way and it works, first start with a sort of an awareness tabletop to get them engaged, to get them understand that they need to have a plan in place, what David was talking about, and then going to what Nett was talking about beforehand. Once they have a plan, then the tabletop changes into more of a practicing, test drilling their plan, doing lessons learned, improving the plan. And then if they do have an incident, they're as ready as they would be. Just not really funny, but a story to share. I spoke to one of our partners this weekend. They onboarded a client on the platform, on the plan, about 2 weeks ago, and before they had a chance to do a tabletop, they had an actual incident, which on one hand, they were happy they did it, but on the other hand, it stressed it again, practice before, like the protocol is have a plan, practice, and then hopefully use it or don't. Yeah.
Right. Interesting. So I'll just kind of cap this piece off with this. Early on, I talked about this, and I'll reiterate this book, The Jolt Effect. With so much sales getting stalled now with indecision, there's many reasons for it, but I will highlight this as what top performers did differently when they started to sense sales. Because we've been taught, right? If you think about it, right, we've went from the evolution of MSP, right, in the from break fix to block time to all-in models, right? Just real quick, the genre of what we've done. We've added on security. We've gone from 150 now into 300-400 a seat, some of us. Well, we're used to all or nothing, right? And when we talk all or nothing, 300-400 a seat, 100 users, there's a lot at stake there, right? What the top performers did when they did sense buyer indecision taking place, paralysis started, we've got to talk to another person, the deal started to get stalled, is they actually de-risked by doing a few things. One, they reassured buyers, hey, look, let's simplify this. Let's take a step. And a tabletop or a risk assessment is a great way to take a step, almost like if you think of like a pilot, right? I'm not asking you to do 100 users at 300 a seat. I'm saying let's walk through something that could be strategic, impactful to your business, and let's look at, is there a comm strategy? What would you do? How would you handle it? And there's a huge amount of trust being built. This is what I'm starting to see top performers do, quote unquote pilots, if we could air quote what this could be. Nett, your thoughts on that, and David, yours as well.
Yeah, I think that analysis paralysis is one of those things that gets all of us, right? Anybody who's been client facing for 30 seconds has run into this at least at some point. And I think that what you just said, the reassurance part, taking a step back, reevaluating, asking those deeper questions again, definitely can help restart that process.
Yeah. And doing something less risky. Maybe your tabletop, like, take a Chris Lair. I think, they're, I don't know what the price. It might be like, hypothetically, it's $5,000 to do a tabletop with, Solace. Well, $5,000 when they were looking at a proposal that was going to be, $20,000 a month. Okay, wow, that's and you build trust that way. David, your thoughts on when you see deals getting stalled and quote unquote doing something less risky, pilot based, building trust.
No, I love the pilots. I think those are to me, the trusted advisor is absolutely the way to go, because that's long-standing relationship, and you're gaining something that's not just a one deal. You're gaining a full book of business, but you're gaining that relationship, and at first, knowing what the or at least trying to understand where that paralysis is coming from. It may be a multitude of things. It could be organizational, operational, political obstacles, anything. But most of the time, it's just knowing that they're afraid to make a mistake. And you said it earlier. And how do you get around that? And the pilot, I think, is fantastic because there's limited investment at that point. You're gaining their time, and you have the ability to prove yourself. And it does get sticky. Obviously, you've got confidence in it. I think the other thing is sharing. We're kind of old school. We still ask for references a lot, and so sharing those success stories, I think, are huge, because you've got a lot of. I think everybody on this call has a lot of success stories, and sharing those is great. And it's proof that you've done well with customers and then this specific engagement. So share those, keep sharing them, and I think they'll help ease that and create the move there that you're looking for.
David, you said something really. I don't know if you ever read the book, but do you know that that fear of making a mistake, you said it, is 2.5 times greater than the opportunity to fix something. So you hit on. People don't want to look bad. People don't want to make the wrong decision. Keep that in mind. When things get complex, when there's a lot of things going on, that fear of doing things incorrect is a bigger driver. And when we reinforce things like, hey, remember we said the status quo has to change. We said this and this, weren't aligned, and this was wrong, and this and that. You're actually reinforcing their fears. So keep those things at heart. All right, Nett. Business impact analysis. We talked a little bit about it. One of my all-time favorite ways to approach. Can you maybe talk about an aha moment when an executive kind of gets it as you're in that conversation, what it looks like, and they're like, "Wow, this actually is meaningful."
Yeah, absolutely. I think I mentioned before, like, one of the challenges is so many companies just see tech as an expense. Like, they just see cyber as another tool, another agent. And part of getting beyond that is trying to change their mindset a little bit. So a few years back, when I was a VCSO, I inherited a client that was under HIPAA compliance. And up until that point, they just saw it as a time waster, something to check boxes. Like, they didn't take it seriously at all. I looked at their most recent evaluation, and it was pretty bad. So I decided to take a different tactic, because they didn't care about compliance. That was just absolutely not important to them, other than making sure they did enough to not, lose anything. So I insisted that we do a business impact analysis. And in doing that, I was able to understand how the business functioned, which was wonderful because I had just inherited them. I didn't know anything about them. So not only did I get to know them, they got to know me, because I was asking these questions and I was showing an interest in their business. I wanted to understand what they were really proud of and the areas that they really struggled in. And by going through this process and understanding all the business functions, the report that comes out of that, the presentation that comes out of that was identifying all the consequences of an outage. So, okay, this is how your business is set up. What happens if we take this piece out? How long are you going to be down for? Is it a hard down or a soft down? What's your communication plan? How long can you be down? Asking all these questions, and they had never thought about it from that perspective. And I won a lot of trust doing that because they saw how much I cared about their business maintaining what they were doing and continuing to grow. So that was a pretty big aha moment. And when I presented the results, I always do the point of contact first to get some response. Her face was just like, her jaw was on the floor because she had never thought of it from that perspective. It was always, you have to buy this thing. You have to pay me to do a project. And that was the first time that they had a consultant who was actually acting like a trusted advisor. And then, of course, I presented all the information to the business leaders, and they had pretty much the same effect, that they were just so surprised that they had now a partner who was looking at what they cared about and looking at it from their perspective. So a BIA is very, very impactful, and it helps to build those relationships. If you haven't done a BIA, I highly recommend doing it with your clients.
Yeah, I think it also shows, and you can almost say, look, I'm sitting on the same side of the table you are. This is like, take me out of the equation. My question is, why wouldn't you do this? Right? I know, this is what my role is. This is, we know how to lead you through this process. We have the confidence to do it successfully and show you the outcomes that'll come out of it. But me aside, why wouldn't you want to know this? Right? And I think the key thing there is to always be quiet after you ask a question. We have the tendency to go, and because of no, be quiet. Ask them the question. Why wouldn't you want to know these things? Right? So David, we talked about taking risks off the table. We just talked about BIAs. What about assessments? Is there a specific methodology or assessment that you use or an approach you take that you found more effective?
Yeah, so I think just asking, I think you mentioned it earlier, just asking questions, I think right off the bat is, the key. Something Nett said just a little while ago is understanding, I'm step back real quick, understanding, you may have a certain blocker, Nett, I don't know if you mentioned it as a blocker, but having somebody in the business who's a blocker and those BIAs help facilitate that conversation, I think really is something to focus on. The assessments for us, I think, is really just a way to facilitate that conversation all through the business.
Yeah. So when we do get, we talk, it's interesting. You talk about blockers. We talked about analysis paralysis. Is there something you do to help boost confidence, David, to get them moving?
Yeah, again, depending who we're talking to, it's for us. It's really the conversation, especially with the assessment and or the tabletops, really just facilitating the conversation. You mentioned it too. Letting the customer answer the question really drives the next conversation. Rarely, most of the time in our tabletops and assessments, we just start by asking questions. More often than not, those stimulate other questions. Honestly, the assessments and the tabletops, selling IR plans are really the easiest things for us to do. We have more success stories here than anywhere, and it's because we are getting to the right. I feel like we're getting to the right conversation, right people in the business, And once we do that, we end up at the end of the project with really favorable reviews, great references, and letting the customers talk and documenting what they're saying and addressing it through the IR plan and or assessment. We're diligent about that. We do push an agenda and we do push our milestones. I don't want to leave that off the table here in conversation, because the milestones and keeping our dates, especially with the C-levels, is something if we don't maintain it, it will go on forever. So we make sure we keep our milestones, and we're agenda driven. We definitely have an end to this project, but once we're done, usually we're in 9 times out of 10 we're asked back. I'd like to think it's even greater than that. For the next year, we do schedule this all over and over, but generally we're seeing really good responses from this, and it's hard to imagine the conversations that aren't successful. I'm trying to think of those where we really saw pushback, because we just don't. It's a need, and I think the business understands that when approached this way.
Yeah. Have you seen it led to from project where you hadn't been managing, being their quote unquote MSP, to becoming managed post doing something like this, David?
Sorry, I missed the question.
So have you gone into a customer, or sorry, a prospect where this was the first thing you've done? They weren't a managed customer, and then this built to bring them on.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. And so different parts of our business, either through professional services directly or ultimately in the queue for managed services to onboard at a future date. Yeah, that's happened a few times, and we lead with this. For now, this is one of our onboarding processes. But it has led to business to onboard as well on a couple of occasions.
I want to actually double down again. I'm going to repeat what you said, because for MSPs that might be listening, and Nett, I'd love for you to give maybe your thoughts on this. You guys are a successful MSP. I know a lot of very successful MSPs. You're landing deals. You're not onboarding tomorrow, right? There could be a 6-8 week backlog. Fair. And what things could we be doing maybe with our professional services team during that? Could we find potential aha moments? Like, hey, we did this piece. This was the precursor of onboarding. I know, for Carl Bickmore, they have a standard of a risk assessment, which is inherent before onboarding. It's part of onboarding. But if, as David said, tabletop and finding out their comm strategy, their BIA, all this is a prerequisite. Like, now you can actually say, hey, look, our backlog's 8 weeks. However, let me talk to you about what's going to happen in that interim. What are your thoughts on that? Nett.
That one for me? Okay.
Yeah.
So with Legion, every client that we onboard starts with an assessment. So before we install an agent, we're starting the assessment. There's a few reasons for that. One, we need to build those relationships, and we need to build them quickly. We need to get their trust. We need them to see us as experts in what we're doing, and we need to understand their environment. It's more than just deploying tools. We need to also understand how their business works. So I agree. Like, they don't need to sit there doing nothing while you're waiting for your onboarding team. That's the perfect opportunity to get your account managers in there, your VCIOs, your VCISOs, whatever it is that they're getting strategy-wise, and get them starting to build those relationships and start doing those assessments. You don't want to waste that time. You want it to be as urgent as they are. With when you sign that contract, you want to start right away. You don't want to wait 6-8 weeks.
So let's shift a little bit. Let's talk third-party risk. This is one that I think is often overlooked. And if you look at the Verizon database, interesting part, you can just Google it, search it early on. We had Phil Langlois, the principal author, on the cyber call, and he's like, we had a hypothesis last year. And he goes, Andrew, our hypothesis was we had looked at some cursory data that 15% of breaches were related to third parties. So in 2025, we wanted to actually use this as a marker to find out, is this something that we should be looking at in the DBIR now going forward? Well, it actually doubled year over year. So they actually used it as a marker. It went from 15 to 30% in 1 year. And so my question, Nett, is how do you get executives starting to think about third-party risk and evaluating vendors, suppliers? There isn't a week that it goes by if you're looking at third-party risk and breaches that a big one doesn't come up. There was one actually in the federal government. I'll put it in chat in a minute. That is astounding that a third-party provider just had a massive breach of a number of our federal agencies. But how do you get them to start to think about this is important then?
Yeah, I think it just isn't optional anymore. You have to do vendor due diligence. They have to take this seriously, and they can't offload it. They have to participate in the process. And the way that I've been able to be successful with implementing vendor due diligence programs is I relate it to all the notices that we have all gotten from various vendors that have had breaches that say, oh, your data was taken by a threat actor. Here's identity management for a year. And then they wash their hands of it. So I bring that up. Well, what does that mean? Where did your data go? Have you noticed an increase in spam calls, right? In spam messages and whatever, to get them to think about it from something that they already know. So, through association, this is something we all experience personally. This is what your business is also experiencing, except it can be significantly more impactful to your business if one of your critical systems that has your client data or other critical data is compromised. And it's more than just, oh, here's, identity management for a year. And they need to understand that it has to be prioritized. So when I was a vCISO, I introduced VDD programs for all of my clients within the first year, if not the first 6 months of being their advisor, because it's that important. And so many organizations either don't have a vendor due diligence program, or they're like, oh yeah, I collect SOC 2s. Oh, so let me tell you what's bad about SOC 2s. You can define the scope. You can say, yes, we have 500 machines, but we're only going to do one server in scope, and they can walk away with a SOC 2. And if you don't know what you're reading and you don't know what the organization looks like, on face value, it looks okay, but in reality, it's not. So SOC 2 is not an attestation of security.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
So
as a vendor, by the way, I really appreciate it when clients do assessments to us, and from time to time, we even learn and we improve our security posture, and it helps us be better.
Yeah, and that's a good example of a partnership, right? But doing vendor due diligence isn't to hurt somebody; it's to help them improve. Mm-hmm. You want your partner to improve. And these upstream attacks, just like you said, Andrew, they're rising. We had another big one this week, Screen Connect, right? That was a pretty big deal. Even though we don't have a lot of details yet, it's a big deal. And the vendors that we allow to have access to our data, we need to evaluate at least annually. And I have a suspicion that is going to move up to quarterly at some time soon because of all of these attacks that are happening, and that supply chain is getting more and more of that market share.
Yeah, absolutely. David, you guys deal with a lot of financial institutions. Is that something that, whether it's FFIEC related, that's something expected? And if not, like, how do you get mind share on that?
Yeah, I think, just making sure that priority's there. Of course, it certainly is, depending on who you're talking to. I think you've got at what level, regional, size institution, they may, and who's really governing that within the organization. A lot of times that's shared. usually GRC, but who our conversations with, and focusing on the fact that it's not static, right? Especially with AI. And so as being mindful of that and being that trusted advisor, initiating that conversation and making sure we're helping push that along. And that's part of our IR plan. That's part of the communication within the IR plan. Whatever contractually we're obligated to. So we're trying to keep those conversations that are relevant to that at the forefront, because it's not just about the, certainly the vendor due diligence is the big part of it, but also how does that come back around during what event? And where contractually we're obligated to notify and all of that on the flip side, if that was the case. So I hope that answers that question. But to me, it's really making sure that the customer, we're putting the questions in front of the customer as a trusted advisor that they may not be thinking of.
Yeah.
Let me add,
yeah.
There's one other thing that when you're starting a new partnership or when you're renewing a partnership with a vendor, you can put in the contract that they're required to notify you for any data breaches. If it's not in your contract, they are not required to.
Yeah. Well, so funny you mentioned that, Nat. That's a question that we should be asking our customers as MSPs. We should be asking our customers, your contracts that you've signed, right, with your big suppliers or your big customers, do you know what your breach requirements are to them? Do you know what your data handling requirements are to them? Guarantee you what kind of response you're going to get.
Yes.
No clue. No clue what our breach handling requirements are. No clue what our data handling requirements, our response, so those are questions, again, that we're not talking about, the gap in security, your MFA, your security awareness training, we're talking about, real business implications that they probably never thought about. So I got one for you, Nett, shifting a little bit, like alignment of different roles at the executive level. Like, some of the research shows right now that we've gone from in the last 10 years that in a decision, in a major decision like changing managed service providers, right? I'm spending $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 a month. Big decision. Used to be 2-3 people were a decision maker. Now, on average, it's 6 to 10. Bigger companies, it's even more. But how do you get alignment? CFO, maybe, different executives. How do you get them aligned? Because that's something where it's, I think, so crucial that we as MSPs don't take into account, especially as we, deals start to get larger and larger and larger.
Yeah, so this is a good one. So when I was a vCISO and I took on a new client or inherited a client, one of the first things I did in each client organization was creating a risk committee, because so many didn't have that, right? And these are exactly the C-level people that need to be in that risk committee, because it's risks to the business. Not technical risk. We're not talking about vulnerabilities and running vuln scans, right? This is risk to the business, insider threat, things like that need to be addressed from a business perspective. So having that risk committee is super important. But what's also important is after you do your initial assessment, which as I mentioned, every client should get an assessment when they're onboarded, is to have one-on-one conversations with each of those leaders in the organization. They're all going to have different priorities. They're all going to have different obstacles, and you need to understand those, because especially as these decision-making pools get bigger, you need to satisfy everybody. One person saying no can throw off your whole recommendation. So you need to understand what the perspectives they're coming from, so that you can speak to them specifically, because your CFO is going to have different priorities than your COO. And they're going to look at each situation differently, and you need to speak to them from those perspectives one-on-one. And going forward, do that at least once a year, if not twice, having those one-on-one conversations just to make sure that you're aligned with them individually, making sure things are going as planned, any more obstacles coming up, et cetera. And you can build that into like, your risk plan and things like that. So
yeah, I was,
you also get more buy-in.
Yeah, if I could just also interject in that, there's this thing called turnover. People leave the business. And if we only have one point of contact, like how often have in the now coming up 30 years of, yeah, it's hard to believe, 30 years of being in this business. If I, had a dime, right, for every MSP I talked to that only had one point of contact, right? And that point of contact leaves. Well, when a new point of contact comes in and you didn't have other alignment in the business, you talk about their business at risk, your business is at risk, right? Tremendously. So that's the other reason for doing this, right? It's not just about understanding how they buy, it's about a defensive strategy in the event someone leaves that you had a strong partner or relationship with. Because again, what happens when, in the NFL, when a coach gets, yanked, right? The wide receivers coach and the defensive coach and all these other, they don't stay. Everybody leaves. Everybody comes in. So, it's really making sure you have some strategic relationships in there in case, something like that were to occur. So, in the interest of time, I know we're about 4 minutes left here. I want to give, just a quick, moment for to kind of talk about, using a centralized platform to manage incidents and tabletops. David, what have you gotten out of it? And then we'll close out with a controversial VCIO topic if we have a minute. But David, your real quick take on centralizing, the fact that, you got, this is a core piece of your business now that, again, is generating revenue, right? Doing tabletops, incident readiness. This is not just, hey, let's just do this for the fun of it.
Yeah, and to keep it short for you, Andrew, the platform sells itself through tabletops, but centralized management, just like anything centralized in off network, has been such an easy sell. Not to mention, the timers and the things that make sense. It's brought the platform from an IR standpoint has brought real make sense functionality to it, and that is such an easy thing to sell itself. We've got great reviews and those references that I mentioned across the board. So we're happy to share those. They've been great for us, and Noam's done a great job there.
Yeah, I put Noam's LinkedIn in if you want to get with him. He's awesome. You've done like I said, in the few years I've known you, you've done such a great job at helping the channel. You've been a great go-giver. It's not always about, you're one of the few people that's come into the channel isn't about, always about, me. It's like, how can I help educate on, from somebody that has done this at some of the largest companies in the world using exigents that have, now come in and said, hey, look, this is an area we have to help others at the SMB level. So thank you for that.
And we're learning a lot. So thank you as well. Really, we're learning a lot. So.
Yeah, awesome. So Nett, let's close with this in the last, hopefully, minute or minute and a half. So VCIO was a topic, VCIO is a term that's been used by many, and now we've got vCISO. I'm going to put out there that I think vCISO is a more controversial term that needs some weight behind it, because we are talking about policy, risk, governance. These are things that actually, can have legal implications to a business. So what are your thoughts on where we should be heading as an industry with vCISO, from your perspective?
Absolutely. And I'm going to give you the water cooler version because I could talk about this topic for ages. So a good vCISO needs to understand tech and cyber and compliance, right? That part's mostly easy for us because that's pretty standard stuff. understanding communications, like on a really deep level, understanding the psychology of people and how to communicate is also super important and not very easy for us to learn. And the fourth one is business acumen, which is very learnable. So one of the challenges is we don't have a standard for what a vCISO is. And we don't want vCISO to turn into what vCIO did, which was basically a salesperson. vCISO needs to stay a security advisor. So we need something in the industry, I think, to put some weight behind it, to say, I did this thing, I have this certification, whatever it is, to say, I have this training that puts all of these categories of things together that qualifies me to say this. I'm not just, a tech that got a new hat to wear. It actually carries some weight.
Very good. Very good. All right. Well, that pulled us right to a minute after. And thank you for that quick synopsis. So I want to thank, first off, Nett, great job. David, phenomenal. Really appreciate you guys taking, an hour or so of time out of your busy schedules and your lives to help others in the channel from your perspectives on doing this day in and day out. Noam, thanks for putting this together. I really do appreciate what you're doing for everybody out there, and again, elevating the industry, the rising tide theory. So with that, and thank you to all of you out there for joining us for this hour. So we'll look forward to seeing you all very soon. Be safe, be healthy, and we can't believe it is June already. So take care, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.